Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 434. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about one of the smallest but most beautiful countries in Europe that used to have a fortress feared across the continent, as we go to Luxembourg.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. This is normally the sponsorship spot for the episode. If you would like to sponsor the Amateur Traveler and support the work that we do here, as well as put your company in front of thousands of travelers, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Rosie Titterington, who's coming to us from Luxembourg and come to talk to us about that lovely country. Rosie, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to talk to you.
And Rosie is a blogger about family and more about Luxembourg. How did you end up in Luxembourg, first of all? You're not from there, I'm guessing.
No, I had never heard of Luxembourg before we moved here, as I think probably many people who even eventually move here had not heard of it, or maybe thought it was part of Germany. We moved here because we kind of always thought in the back of our minds we might like to have an adventure, just try something new. And my husband, through sort of a long story, he had a connection here and he got a job offer. And so we thought, hey, why not? We're up for it.
And why should someone come visit you in Luxembourg? Or not necessarily come visit you? Why should someone come to Luxembourg?
Well, there's several reasons. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but because I live here. But especially if you're coming to Europe and you're maybe nervous about languages or being confusing or getting lost, Luxembourg is nice and small and compact. So that makes it very easy to get around, to get from one site that you're trying to see to another site. It's also very clean and safe. It's green and pretty even in the city center. And it's quite a diverse country because there are so many immigrants and expats that live here.
And I'm assuming some of that is because the European Union has made Luxembourg sort of one of its three big cities in terms of where things are situated.
Yes, and even some American companies have found their homes, their European homes here. And then, yes, there's a lot of banking and European Union activity that happens here as well.
Now, you say in the center of the city, so you're in Luxembourg City?
Yes, I live in Luxembourg City.
Which is the big city in the country. And the country is 500,000 people total, and Luxembourg City is about a fifth of that, as I recall.
Yes, that's correct.
So even the capital city is really the size of my hometown, which is a forgettable city in California. So you are talking about a place that's fairly approachable.
Yes, it's very approachable. You can get by with English for the most part. It's also very family-friendly place. There's lots for families and children to do as well.
Mm-hmm. Although I found either French or German was a little helpful just in terms of navigating restaurants and hotels and those sort of things that didn't hurt.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it does go a long way, even just a bonjour or merci.
Okay. Excellent. And what would you recommend someone do and see in Luxembourg? What kind of itinerary would you draw for them?
To start out, you definitely would want to spend a day just exploring the city. And the best way to do that is just by walking. It's very walkable. And the striking thing about Luxembourg as a city is that it's on two levels. So you sort of have this plateau with the main city center and some other areas. And then there's this sort of canyon ravine sort of thing that wraps itself around the city center and the main areas of the city. And it's got a lot to do with why Luxembourg was sort of a fortress area in over many centuries.
Well, Luxembourg was a fortress city. It had a natural defenses and then was built into one of the most formidable fortresses in Europe, so much so that in the 1800s, a big treaty that divided up Luxembourg, gave part of it to Belgium, also tore down the fortress so that they would stop fighting over it, basically. So,
Right. So it's on these two levels, which is just makes it a really just striking area to walk through. So when visitors come to see us, we always take them for a walk down through this valley, which is called the Petrus Valley. And we walk through sort of from the southern end of that and around the city center, which you'll see all the fortresses and the rock formations which the city sits on top of. So you walk through there and then you walk down through into the Grund, which is a very nice area as well. And then you can keep walking through Clausen and then back up around. And as you're walking through there, you look up and to the side you see the casemates. And you definitely would want to go in there because that's a unique feature of
UNESCO
Luxembourg.
World Heritage Site, in fact.
Yes, exactly. And so you can go inside there and imagine what it would have been like to be defending this fortress. And there's great views then looking out from those casemates. So we always take people kind of down through and then back up and around and into the casemates. And so they're looking back down on sort of what we just walked through, which is nice and green and lovely with more ruin-looking stuff.
And I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with the term casemates. So that's basically, this is the remains of what is left of the fortress. And it's carved into the rock is the reason why they didn't tear it down.
Yes, most of it they closed off, but there's parts that you can still visit.
And see where some of the cannons still sitting there, or at least put back at this point. Now, I have to say, though, Rosie, I feel like you've undersold Luxembourg City at this point. So
Okay.
I'm going to chip in and say that as you were describing this valley, of all the cities I have seen in Europe, I would have to say Luxembourg City may be the most beautiful.
I absolutely agree because now we've done a little bit of traveling. I mean, I'm not some great world traveler, but we've been to several European cities in the general area in France and the Netherlands and in Germany and Belgium. And just walking through the city, it's definitely a unique experience that you would want to see as you're coming to Europe, I think. Of course, I'm biased, but here we have another biased person. So,
well, I wouldn't say necessarily I'm biased, but in my opinion, it just because of what you were describing, that two-level thing that basically it sits up on this big rock. And then I think the other thing that I thought that made a difference there is, I don't know why architecturally, but all the spires of the churches and the buildings are really, really tall and pointy. And so it has a very striking look, I thought.
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. And I interrupted you. You were taking us on a tour here.
Yes. So anyway, so then after you've done the casemates, you've gone down there. Then when you come back up, absolutely go into the city center. And there's a couple of nice squares there. And you can go by the palace, the Grand Duke's Palace. And I know they do tours of those in the summer. I have not done that yet, but it's nice to walk by and see that. And across from that, we always take visitors to the Choco Spoon place. So it's we take them to the Chocolate House. And here you get these little wooden spoons, and on the end is a block of chocolate. And there's all different kinds of flavors you can choose from for the chocolate. anything from cinnamon to strawberry to, I think you can even have like a little shot of alcohol in them that comes with your little spoon. But so what you do is you dip the spoon into steamed milk. And then as the chocolate melts in the steamed milk, it creates this wonderful hot chocolate experience. So we always take visitors for that, and it's a big hit. And it's also a nice thing to take back home for your friends and family if they want to know something about Luxembourg. It's easy to pack.
Excellent.
Because they can make their own steamed milk at home, obviously. So
Well, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is I was just in Luxembourg this year for the first time, but see, these are the things that I didn't know. So
yes, you have to go for a Choco Spoon. It's right now, anytime we have a repeat visitor, even like my father-in-law, we always go back to get a Choco Spoon. So
excellent. The one thing I would say before we leave the city is that the Visit Luxembourg tourist office also does a walking tour, which I took part of when I was there. So if you're looking for a guided walk of some of the areas, you wouldn't go into the casemates, for instance, but you'd walk around and talk about some of the history of how Luxembourg is still this little tiny country in the middle of Europe and some of the history of it. I found that to be a very good tour. And it is in English as well as in German and French, I believe. Anything else we should see in Luxembourg City?
there's actually a great park right in the city center. It's the pirate ship park. So if you have kids, definitely check that out. It's a giant pirate ship. You can climb on it. There's giant slides.
Now, for seeing the rest of the country, would you base yourself in Luxembourg City and do day trips then?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. It's really easy to make day trips from the city center, and the public transportation from there is great. So it's a great way to ground yourself, I'd say.
Excellent. So where would you take us to next then?
So one thing that we did with my parents when they came to visit, which looking back is sort of a highlight from all the things that we've done with visitors that have come, is we found out that Luxembourg actually has over 100 castles. So we thought, well, let's pick some castles that look interesting to us and just sort of do a little loop tour of castles. So we went to Bourchied, we went to Burglingster, Esch-sur-Zur. Those were some of our favorites. The classic one that everyone goes to is Vianden, and I would definitely recommend going there, especially if you're in the warmer months. There's a chairlift that takes you from the bottom of the valley up past the castle, which is already seated on a nice sort of outcrop hill. It takes you past that up to a higher hill, and there's a little cafe up there, and you can have a little refreshment and look down at the castle. And then you can either ride the chairlift back down, or you can walk your way back down to the castle and do maybe a tour of the castle there, which I think is also a pretty worthwhile one to do in English, an audio tour of that.
And where is that from Luxembourg City, and how would I get there?
For Vianden, if you're taking public transportation, it's to the north. It's basically to the north, but near the German border a little bit. Okay. So, but think directly north. And so if you're taking public transportation, you can take a train to either the Diekirch or Edelbruck station, and from there you have to take a bus. But the bus will take you right to the bottom of the hill where the castle is. So you can do it that way, or you can drive. But it's about, I'd say, an hour on public transportation, less than that if you're driving yourself.
Excellent. And then, sorry, you were taking us someplace else.
We did a tour of these sort of, I guess, lesser known castle ruins, but they're just in such gorgeous green settings, and you can climb around the ruins and see breathtaking views, and they're not overcrowded. They're just sweet little castle ruins. And so you can hit up probably 3 or 4 of those easily within a day. And some of them have just self-guided tours, or some of them you just climb around on, and that's about it. But I would definitely recommend doing that.
And would it be better to rent a car for that day to get around between them?
To get between them, it just depends on which ones you end up choosing. We did that one by car, which made it easier. But if you're going maybe straight to Vianden, you can easily do that on public transportation. And some of the other ones, you could do a one-shot on public transportation. But yeah, if you're going to do a tour,
3 or 4 in a day or something.
yeah, then you would probably want to have a car. I'm sure you could do a tour of a few of them by bicycle if you were ambitious. I know Luxembourg is a big biking area as well.
And the 3 that you, could you name those again?
Borsheed, definitely go to Borsheed. That's one of my favorites. It's just in an amazing setting, really. And there is an English audio guide tour there. Esch-sur-Zur they're all sort of near this Vianden area anyway. It's all kind of in the middle north of the country, I'd say. So Esch-sur-Zur is another, and in just a beautiful setting. Borglinster was another one of our favorites. That one is much smaller, but it's just in a cute little town, and it's really neat because you can see where the new castle was built right on top of the old castle ruins. So it's interesting to see the demarcation there, I guess you could say.
And what else would you recommend that we see in Luxembourg?
Also in that same general area, sort of the middle northeast, I guess, area of Luxembourg, as you're close to the German border, is this area called Little Switzerland or Petite Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's called Petite Switzerland is because it has some of these similar rock formations, I guess, to Switzerland, certain areas of Switzerland that are quite striking. So this is a great area for rock climbing and also for hiking. It's just a gorgeous hiking area just because of these rock formations that you can kind of meander through.
And is this on the way to Echternach?
Yes, it is. Very close by to Echternach.
Okay. I took the bus there, and unfortunately, the bus doesn't stop in these little these fascinating rock formations in between. And so I watched them go by, and when I went and asked how would I get there without a car, and it was basically, well, yeah, you'd have to walk in 5 miles from one direction or another. So this is another place that I think we're going to want a car.
Yeah, but once you get up to that area, we picked up a trail map at a campsite in that area. I think it was in Berdorf. There's a camping area, and there was a camping office, and we picked up a trail map there. And that, if you want to go hiking, there is just an amazing wealth of hiking that you can do through there. So as long as you can get there somehow, then, and even like you say, there might be places that a bus would drop you that would be a great place to hike from. I'm sure you could ask the tourist office about that.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that looked like a very beautiful area. I just wish that I wasn't just driving through it. Hiking through it, I think, would be the appropriate speed. Yeah.
Yes, my kids loved it too. It's just the sort of thing where you walk in, you're like, wow, because you're driving in this just farmland. And it's just flat, and there's not much there. And then suddenly there's this forest, and you go into this forest, and all these cool cracks and rocks you're walking through, and giant holes that you have to wear. Like, we saw people with like headlamps and stuff going down into these caves. And so it's just amazing that Luxembourg, this tiny little country, and you're just driving through these farms, and then there's this little magical forest there.
Excellent. Anything else we should see while we're in that area?
Yes, I would say recently we did a trip with actually my in-laws to Diekirch to see the World War II museum there. It's actually a museum with more of Luxembourg's sort of general military history, but it specifically also focuses on the Battle of the Bulge and that particular interaction between the American troops and the Luxembourgish troops. And it also shows some of the German side. Some German soldiers have contributed their stories and equipment and uniforms to that. And it's in this old brewery. And you think it's this tiny museum, and you keep going through it, and there is just more and more and more stuff from World War II. I have no idea how they packed so much stuff into this tiny museum, but you climb up to one level, and there's a giant room of just military vehicles and equipment. It's quite amazing. You could easily spend a day walking through that museum. In fact, you'll probably need a break for lunch and then just keep at it again, I would say.
Anything else we should do in terms of the tour of Luxembourg in general before we start asking some of our typical questions?
No, I think that if you spend some time visiting the castles, if you spend some time visiting a museum and doing some hiking. I think that that's kind of the general idea of what Luxembourg has to offer.
Excellent. The one museum you say that just reminded me, I enjoyed also in Luxembourg City the museum that's in Fort Thungen, which is sort of across one of the chasms from the main city over by where a lot of the EU buildings are. But it's one of the remaining outlying forts, and the inside there they had a good history museum of the history of Luxembourg, which I enjoyed.
The striking thing about that museum is its backdrop also against the Modern Art Museum, which is right behind it. So you get to see, that's really a typical Luxembourgish scene there, is these modern buildings and then these really old buildings right next to it. I mean, I suppose Europe is like that in general, but Luxembourg has, I think, a unique contrast of the two that's really striking.
Excellent. What do the guidebooks recommend? We've talked about what we should do. What do the guidebooks recommend that you think are a little bit of a waste of time?
If you go visit the casemates, yes, you should visit the casemates. I think probably the Bach casemates is enough. I've heard that there's the Petrus casemates as well, and those are open only certain times of the year. And I heard they're just a bit kind of dingy and slippery and a little bit maybe too dark, whereas the Bach casemates are, they're caves, but they're also open and easy to manage.
Okay. And then any hidden things that we wouldn't read about in the guidebooks, but now that you've been living there, your kids love, for instance, or the visitors you take just really enjoy that little spot?
One museum that is very specific to Luxembourg is the Milk Museum. And I don't know if all the guidebooks recommend this because it's a little bit odd, but it's this state-of-the-art. First of all, it's a processing facility for Luxembourg's brand of milk, which is Lux Lait. And so what they've done here at this processing facility is they put this museum attached on. And what you do is you go in, you put on your little lab coats, and then your 3D glasses, and there's this 3D presentation of how milk comes from the cow to the store. And then you get to kind of tour the factory in your little lab coats. I mean, it's all blocked off, so it's like sterile. But there's these, it's just very I don't know how much money went into this thing, but it's a very unique experience for kids, and we learned a lot too, the adults who went. And then when you're done with the tour, they have some interactive stations for children, mostly on the wonderful benefits of milk to your health. But you can ride little bicycles and treadmills, and it's a great way for kids to get their wiggles out if you happen to be there on a rainy day and can't visit one of the amazing parks.
Excellent. Any recommendations on places to stay or places to eat?
As far as places to stay goes, the only recommendation I could maybe give is areas. I know the youth hostel is actually in a nice, pretty spot. So if you're into that, then that's an option. There's good camping sites. But as far as just where you might want to stay if you're staying in a hotel, if you were to stay in the Grund area or the Clausen area or the city center, these areas that's just right around the city center, those are very attractive, but probably more busy with nightlife and probably more expensive. If you wanted to still be in the city, but maybe you wanted to just walk into the city from your hotel, I would recommend maybe the Limpertsburg or Bel Air area, because these are very easy to walk into the city from. Kirchberg, the modern area of the city with all the EU buildings, has some really nice hotels there, but you probably wouldn't want to walk in there from there. You would want to bus in from there just because it's busy streets and whatnot. So the last thing I'd say is that if you are going to stay near the train station, just don't stay right near the train station.
You just put exactly my hotel on the map, but
yeah, I mean, it's all relative. I mean, Luxembourg is a very safe and clean city, so it's not to worry if you're by the train station, but maybe not staying right on Rue Strasbourg or Rue Hollerich, the streets that are right next to the train station might be advised. A little bit away from that, you're golden, so no problem.
Great. What's going to be the biggest surprise for somebody who's never been to Luxembourg?
I'm always surprised, and I think that our visitors have been surprised that it just has so much variety packed into this tiny little country. And it surprises me even that many people who live here haven't taken the time to explore all that Luxembourg has to offer. They seem to want to go further afield. But between the castles, the hiking that you can do, and just the beauty of it all and the variety of landscape, I think that was surprising to me. And when people come to visit us, they say, hey, for a country that I never even heard of or read about in any guidebooks, this is actually really, really nice. And we kind of have a joke in our family that the reason why Rick Steves and some of these other well-known travel writers haven't mentioned Luxembourg is actually because they really love Luxembourg and they want to keep it a secret. So that's our theory. We like it.
What time of year or what day of year would you recommend people come to Luxembourg?
Well, my husband visited Luxembourg for the first time at Christmas time when he was meeting his friend that ended up being the connection for his job. And that actually convinced him, I think, in part to move here. So I have to definitely recommend Christmas time because we do have a Christmas market. And of course, a lot of the countries nearby also have their own Christmas markets. So Christmas is lovely. Also, in the summer, of course, is gorgeous. Yes, Luxembourg tends to be a little bit rainy. It's similar to where I'm from in Portland, Oregon. So it's not that big of a deal to me. But that's what makes it so green and beautiful. So if you don't mind a little rain, then come anytime. But yeah, I would say late summer, early fall is probably the most beautiful time for Luxembourg.
Okay. And then you're standing in the prettiest spot in all Luxembourg. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Wow, that's hard to choose. It's definitely somewhere down in the Petrus Valley. There is this bridge in the Grund where you can actually, we didn't mention this before, you can take an elevator from the city center up top straight down to the Grund area, and there's a bridge over a river, and you can see kind of up to the city, and the area around is just gorgeous. And I think it's probably legally required that you have to take a photo there if you're in Luxembourg. So that's kind of the classic spot where everyone would think of if they were thinking of Luxembourg. If you continue on past that area, though, if you continue north, I guess you'd say, you'll head towards Clausen. You'll walk by the Abbey that's down there that's got one of those steeples that you mentioned earlier. So you walk by the Abbey, and you'll kind of wind your way through some ruins. And then you'll get to a part of the river that sort of has a mini waterfall. And this is apparently where the lower class folk used to do their laundry on this little waterfall here. And there's actually a little placard, a sign, and it has a picture of people doing their washing on this little mini waterfall. And that's just a gorgeous spot there. You're looking back up at the casemates and across over towards the Abbey, and there's a bridge. It's actually currently the header on my blog, the picture at the top of my blog is that. I think one of those two spots.
Excellent.
Your breath will be taken away.
And actually that reminded me of one thing. We were talking about things you can do with a family, but for people who are traveling who may be looking for more nightlife, it also occurred to me that if we continue down that river, we also get to the brewery area, too, where they've done a lot of renovation and
exactly
things going on there too. We should mention that. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Luxembourg.
You might see the same person 3 times in one day, just walking around the city.
I completely understand what you're saying. It's surprising to me how small the city is because it doesn't look that small. And being a capital city, it doesn't feel that small. And yet I could completely imagine that you would. It is just not that big. Last 2 questions. You really know you're in Luxembourg when what?
When you're on the bus or a train and you're pretty sure you just heard about 10 different languages being spoken.
And if you had to summarize Luxembourg in just 3 words, what 3 words would you choose?
Charming.
Okay.
Striking. and surprising.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Rosie Titterington. And Rosie, where can people read about your travels and your life in Luxembourg?
I have a blog. It's called The Tease, as in Titterington, and it's at peteandrosie.blogspot.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Luxembourg.
Thanks. I'm always glad to speak about Luxembourg.
In news this week, you may recall that we talked about the knee defender a while back on at least This Week in Travel. I think we may have also brought it up on Amateur Traveler, but it's a device that keeps the people in front of you from reclining their seats. Now, most airlines ban the use of the knee defender because they have the rules and you're not above them. But this week a fight broke out on a United Airlines plane because a man sitting in the middle seat of row 12 used the knee defender to stop a woman in front of him from reclining while he was on his laptop. A flight attendant asked him to remove the device and he refused. The woman stood up, turned around and threw a cup of water at him. United landed the plane and kicked them both off. No one was arrested, but you can get arrested and fined up to $25,000 if you cause an unscheduled landing of a flight like this. The irony is the passengers were already sitting in United's Economy Plus that has 4 more inches of legroom. For a link to that story, look in the lyrics of this episode of The Amateur Traveler, where you'll find that and all other links that we mention on this show. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com, and you'll find a link to where, again, in the lyrics of this episode. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.